All right, joining us now here on In the Circle. We're recording this prior to his landing and arrival at East Lansing, Michigan, the site of the Big Ten tournament. He's the radio voice of the Nebraska Cornhuskers. He's our Big Ten correspondent. Nate Rohr back with us and In the Circle. And Nate, welcome back. The last time we had you on, since then, things kind of worked out for Nebraska. You've had a pretty good run since then.
Well, no doubt. We won 18 straight games. So I'm grateful, and I'm sure Coach Ravel and everybody with the Husker softball program is grateful for the immense karma that you gave us when I made the appearance. We've lost. We had a stretch of losing 5 out of 7. Won the last 2 games of the Indiana series to close out the regular season. So just in time for postseason, just in time to get refueled. Here I am, and hopefully it works out the same way.
It's been an incredible year, and we talked about what a year you had the last time we had you on. You're the 2 seed in the Big Ten tournament. As we tape this, you'll be playing the winner of Penn State, Indiana, who's going to be playing the day before. You'll be playing on Thursday. I want your thoughts. Where right now do you feel as Nebraska right now? Do you feel you're locked into the tournament? Do you feel you still need some wins? How do you feel about Nebraska going into the Big Ten tournament as far as the implications for the NCAA tournament?
Well, when you look at the RPI, and this is at the beginning of the week before anybody plays any conference tournament stuff, Nebraska's sitting 30th, which is a pretty safe bet to make it into the NCAA tournament. For my own amusement and edification, I went through and tried to figure out, all right, where exactly is the bubble? And it landed in the low 40s range. And the first team out was Arizona at, I think, 42.
Yeah.
So if Nebraska's sitting at 30, some things would really have to go nuts for the Huskers to not get into the NCAA tournament. Now, especially being in the Big Ten, a league that has always suffered from some respect issues and in getting its sort of just desserts from the committee, you're not buying anything until you see your name on the screen going to a regional on Selection Sunday. But I think it's safe to say Nebraska is fairly confident, regardless of what happens Thursday, regardless of what else happens, that they are going to be a regional team.
I have you in my bracketology going to Stillwater, Oklahoma. Does that make sense to you? You think I'm crazy there? Obviously, the 400-mile radius plays into factors in some of this stuff, and we're not going to get into in depth. But what's your thoughts on that?
That sounds pretty reasonable to me. Just in looking at it, there are really 3 regional sites, 3 sites that are probable regional sites that Nebraska could go to. Stillwater is the only one that's actually inside the 400-mile radius. Now, the wrinkle here is that Oklahoma is like 430 miles, Lincoln to Norman, and Lincoln to Fayetteville down to Arkansas is just slightly longer, like 435 miles. And Husker baseball last year played in the Arkansas regional and bust. So I think it's one of those 3 places. I think it's Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, or Arkansas. Oklahoma State makes some sense because of the 400-mile radius, but the one sort of mark against Oklahoma State is the fact that that's a place you could send Missouri pretty conceivably as a 2 that buses in, whereas you can send Nebraska, and though not officially a bus a little bit out of that radius, it's pretty conceivable that Nebraska could bust down to Arkansas as the 2. And you've got to figure out a way to bust more of those SEC teams. So when I went through today at the beginning of the week and kind of looked at things, Fayetteville is where I landed. But either Stillwater or Norman, those are probably right there too. Those 3 places, and I know narrowing it down from 16 or 17 to 3 isn't quite pinpointing it, but I don't think you're far off from it. I sure wouldn't be surprised if Nebraska ended up in the OSU regional.
And for those that don't know, like the NCAA, and I've talked to committee members about this stuff. Like if a team is over 400 miles, they tend to just, you might as well just fly. You're gonna fly. Now baseball, I like baseball. Baseball's a little more flexible and stuff. I wish softball was. What's your thoughts on the 400-mile radius? Do you think it should go away? I feel like I don't think we can get a true seeding of a tournament with this kind of. And I've even spoke to the committee chairperson, Sandy Atkins this year. She admits that the 400-mile radius makes it more complicated for the committee because you're not seeding the two seeds, 17 to 32. It's kind of random based on how it all plays out. Did you wish it would go away and make it easier?
Well, on one level, in terms of competitive balance, yeah, I wish they could just go straight through, line it up on RPI and go, okay, top 16, you're all hosting 17, 17 goes to 16, 18 goes to
Right.
15, all that. Uh, our sport's growing. Things are going better with college softball, but I think it's not realistic that they could just completely throw cost considerations out the window, um, to where they could just straight seed it out, you know, with full respect toward competitive balance. I hope they take it into consideration. I think they should. But it does create some interesting storylines if you have regionally based regionals. If you have teams that are close, and also the ability of fan bases on short notice to go and watch their team. And that's one consideration that we shouldn't forget, is the fact that we're asking parents and fans on a week notice, even less than that, really, 4 or 5 days, to go and try and figure out how to get to a regional. And in some cases, that's feasible. And if you're looking at, whoever plays in the Seattle regional, for instance, that's a pretty tough plane ticket to try and scrape together on 5 days notice. And so I, for competitive balance, yeah, absolutely. You want it seeded out more equitably, but there are other considerations even beyond just sort of the naked commerce of, hey, it's the NCAA and they want to save a buck.
It's a long conversation. We could spend hours on that topic.
Mhm.
Thoughts on the job Rhonda Revelle has done this year. I believe she should be Big Ten Coach of the Year for the job she's done here. It's one of you, but you know her as well as anybody. You know the program as well as anybody. Speak to the job she's done with this team.
Well, I think she's done a terrific job. And I don't know if, you know, you would give it to the Drohans just because they won the conference championship. But I know that they returned a lot of talent, and Nebraska's made a big time improvement this year. And Coach Revelle held our postseason banquet yesterday, right after the game. And she mentioned that this has been an effort from last summer in communicating with the leadership of this team and building the leadership, starting with the tri-captains, Carly Sievers, Olivia Farrell, and Courtney Wallace, and then letting them take more ownership and control of this team and leading it down the path that they've led them down. And Rhonda has mentioned that they've never had to coach effort. They've never had to coach attitude. And it's amazing what happens when you walk into practice with a great mindset and you work hard through practice in a great mindset. And this team has worked very hard. They've developed. It might be Rhonda's best coaching job in total. You look at the couple of years where she's gotten Big 10 or Big 12 Coach of the Year. She's gotten it in years where Nebraska's won a conference championship and they were immensely talented. They had Peaches James, or they had the Edwards twins. And not to say that Nebraska isn't talented this year, but I think the staff has done a very good job of developing the talent. So whether Rhonda gets it or not, I think it's a slam dunk that she has done. She and her staff, Lori Sipple and Diane Miller as well, have done a really good job in developing the talent that they have and building them up and giving them the tools that they need to lead this program down the right path, because player-led teams get more done than coach-led teams.
What's been the key to the success on the field and will be key moving forward, not only in the Big Ten tournament, but in the NCAA tournament?
The reflex would be pitching, just because, as far as a key, especially in postseason softball, you need people pitching well. And, Olivia Farrell had a long stretch where she was pitching about as well as anybody in the Big Ten Conference. She's faded from that. She's still pitching okay, but not quite at that top level that she was. But Courtney Wallace turned in a great weekend this past weekend against Indiana, and Kaylin Kinney had a very nice start. But I think the biggest thing for me is lineup depth and production. The top of the Nebraska lineup in this brief downturn where they lost 5 out of 7 through the first game of the Indiana series, the top of the Nebraska lineup had really faltered, thinking about Billy Andrews, who got off to a remarkable start this year. Sydney Gray kind of tailed off. And while it's really helped that this team has had production 1 through 9 in the lineup, at the same time, it started with the fact that, well, Billy Andrews is somebody you have to reckon with, Cami Barra, Maya Felder, etc. Sydney Gray on down the list. And so that bottom half of the order felt less pressure. Well, as the top slumped, eventually that spread to the bottom half. And to that end, I think there are some really encouraging signs. Yesterday, the top half of the order was really productive for Nebraska in the regular season finale against Indiana. So it's sparking the top of the order so that hopefully the rest of the lineup catches fire. And then that also takes some heat off the pitching. I think that's the fact that they've gotten production 1 through 9 has been the real key to this season, and getting top level production from the top of the lineup is what's going to spark whatever they do in the postseason.
Of course, Nebraska is the 2 seed in the Big Ten tournament. The 1 seed is the regular season champions Northwestern, who's coming off taking some lumps here, losing 2 out of 3 to a hot Minnesota team that we'll talk about shortly. But I think the storyline with Northwestern in this Big Ten tournament now, Nate, is do they have to win the Big Ten tournament to get back to being a top 8 seed? Are they a top 8 seed? They might be fighting for that this week. What's your thoughts on the Wildcats?
To answer the question you raised about top 8, I do think they have to win it, which, is a shame because I think they had played their way into a top 8 national seed to where they could host a super regional. And for that team and for that program, it would have been really special. But, to get that honor, again, especially in a Big Ten conference that always suffers some perception problems, you have to have a good season front to back. You have to dominate. And Minnesota put it together at the end of the year. Minnesota's pitching has underperformed or had underperformed until the last weekend of the year. They put it together last weekend. I mean, back-to-back shutouts of that lineup is incredible. And with Northwestern, maybe there was just a potpourri of distractions, being on the verge of a Big Ten title, the thought of the top 8 national seed, whatever. But credit Minnesota for pulling themselves together, finding a way to get outs, because the lineup's there. Their lineup is really good. But that pitching staff, because of some injuries to Autumn Pease and such, just hadn't been effective or as effective until this last week. You can lump in the doubleheader sweep of Wisconsin in the midweek along with the Northwestern game. So, I think the Cats have to win the Big Ten tournament if they're to be a top 8 national seed, because I don't think the committee is going to look at losing to a decent but okay Minnesota team that's probably going to be right on the bubble. I don't think the committee is going to look at that and just brush that aside and say, up until then you were a top 8 seed.
See, it's a good segue. That's why we work in this industry here. We know how to segue. Wisconsin, Minnesota. They're going to be the 8-9 game. This is a big game. Minnesota just swept Wisconsin last week in a 2-game series. Minnesota and Wisconsin, I think, are the 2, quote, bubble teams that we don't know if they're in or out. I think Minnesota's on the upward trend. I have them in. Wisconsin's on the downward trend. I still have them in, but they're, to me, as one of the last 4 in, potentially. this is a big game because the loser of this game is going to sweat it out on Sunday, whereas the winner maybe picks up that insurance win that might be enough to get him in the tournament. Your thoughts on those two?
Oh, I think it's a critical game as far as determining a regional bid. It may even very well be an an elimination game. Winner thinks they're in a regional, and the loser is very, very worried for Selection Sunday, and especially from Wisconsin's standpoint. I mean, they faltered at the end of the year. They lost that series to Michigan to end the regular season. They got swept by Minnesota in the midweek doubleheader. I just feel like Wisconsin's case has weakened to the point where this is an absolute must win for them. And you know, they're sitting at 38th in the RPI, and that's, you know, when I went through and just kind of penciled things in, they're a last four in, and that bid can dry up. Depending if you take if your last statement to the committee is a 1-5 week followed by a first round loss in the Big Ten tournament, I can see the committee going, we can't let you in. And also add to that, Eric, the fact that the Big Ten's looking like they're going to get 5 in. I think we can say that safely. Getting 6 in for the Big Ten conference is a big deal. It doesn't happen often. And so, you know, does the committee blanch on letting that many Big Ten teams in? So, yeah, Minnesota, Wisconsin, that's the game I have circled on that Wednesday in this Big Ten conference, because I think it's going to have a lot to say about an NCAA at-large bid, and the loser very well could be out of the picture. They could be the first team out.
I agree 100%, especially if it's Wisconsin. Minnesota's resume, I mean, they played a tough schedule, got 2 wins over Northwestern, wins over Wisconsin. They have a win against, they have quality wins, a win against Arizona State, who might be the Pac-12 champion. Wisconsin is kind of scuffling there. And I agree with your skeptic there. Is the Big Ten really going to get 7? I currently have them at 7, but do I feel great about it? No. And I'm with you. I have Wisconsin right now as one of the last 4 in, and you know how this works.
Sure.
It's a bid stealer in the A-Sun or at a Sun Belt or a team in the Pac-12 could easily snatch that bid depending on how this week goes. So I agree 100%. This is an enormous game for both Wisconsin and Minnesota, especially I think Wisconsin, who might have the lesser resume if you compare them with Minnesota. It's a monster game, and what a draw, because the winner then gets Northwestern. Now, if you want to secure a spot, knock off Northwestern. That's going to get you, I would think, again, especially if Minnesota does it for a 3rd time in a week. Wow, that would be something.
Yeah, Minnesota, they're definitely, sitting there in that 9 seed. If you're looking for a bottom half, and being the 9 seed, they're even bottom 3rd of the bracket. Minnesota is a heck of a dark horse right now, the way they've put it together. And we just don't know how Northwestern's going to react to playing, if Minnesota plays and wins over Wisconsin. If Minnesota plays Northwestern again, are they in their heads? Is it a psychological thing? Where is Northwestern's head right now? I'm Minnesota's definitely the Big Ten team right now that is the most interesting to me because of their late charge and because of how their bracket sets up. I mean, you could win your way into regionals on Wednesday, and then on Thursday you could win a 3rd game against the team that not only won the Big Ten, but I think was the presumptive best team in the Big Ten all year. Even with Nebraska's undefeated start in the league, I think we all kind of had in the back of our heads the best team was Northwestern in terms of accumulated talent, Rachel Lewis, Daniel Williams, all that stuff. I think we all had it in the back of our heads. Northwestern was the best team. It was just a question of how the results would fall. Well, if Minnesota gets a 3rd win out of 4 against them in less than a week, then all of a sudden, not only are they a team that's really scary in the context of the Big Ten tournament, but heaven help the team that gets them in regionals, because it's a program that's used to this stage, that expects to be on this stage, and may be putting everything together at just the right time.
No doubt about that. Let's talk about two of the establishments. Michigan and Ohio State both are going to be in the tournament. Michigan's the 4 seed in this tournament. Ohio State's actually a 6. They got to open with Purdue. Your thoughts on these two teams? I have the Buckeyes for now in Knoxville going against Tennessee. Michigan's kind of interesting. Remember last year they got sent to out west. Coach Hutch wasn't real happy about that. Doesn't look like at this moment that a Kentucky type is going to host. Doesn't look like Michigan is going to be able to host. So really, it's kind of anybody's guess where Michigan might get sent. Maybe their performance here will play a role in all that. But what's your thoughts on Michigan, Ohio State?
Well, obviously both are sure regional teams. And I think, Michigan is another team that's kind of coming on late, not quite as strong as Minnesota, but a team that is finishing strong, is kind of sniffing the finish line, and would be a pretty dangerous team to have in your regional. Durkowski, their third pitcher, is starting to turn in some really good work for them, and if you're coming at a team with 3 pitchers in regionals, that's a whole lot to try and deal with. So Michigan's a team that's interesting to me. I don't know how they set up as far as the Big Ten tournament. Can they get past Northwestern? Assuming that Northwestern wins their way into that semi. Can they beat Minnesota? To summarize it, I think the bottom half of that bracket is tougher than the top half with Nebraska's half of the bracket. So Michigan's an interesting team to me. And then Ohio State, there's a lot to like about them. I mean, Lexi Handley is just a big, dominant left-hand pitcher that really stymied Nebraska when they saw her a couple of weekends ago. The offense is solid, but I'm not seeing the one thing they do great. There are a lot of things that they do good. I don't know that I see anything that they do great. So it'll be interesting to see what plays for Ohio State in the regional. And they're a team that can win a first round game in a regional, but the question is, if the top seed in their regional figures out Lexi Handley, how else are they going to beat you? And I think that's a difficult question that they yet have to answer.
No, I agree with that. Having seen them in person, I agree with you on that. The 3 seed in this tournament is the Illinois, the quiet team. They kind of sneak around, play a tough non-conference schedule with Tyra Perry. I've joked with her and her associate coach, Laura Trout, that it seems like every time Illinois makes the tournament, they go to Kentucky. Well, Kentucky, as of right now, ain't hosting. They're down in the low 20s. I don't have them hosting. They're going to need a good SEC tournament maybe to get back into hosting. But what's your thoughts on the Fighting Illini?
Yeah, just solid team, decent offense, kind of like Ohio State in that respect, in that there's not any part of their game that really just blows you away, but there aren't any real holes either. And, Tyra Perry has prepared this team with a tough schedule, as you've mentioned. And so, maybe it's just the toughness of coming through a Big Ten tournament bracket that favors Illinois, because they do a lot of things pretty well, but not one thing that really grabs you, not one hitter that really blows your doors off. So they're a contender, and they'll certainly put up a fight, especially in that semi. They're obviously a regional team, but they're a team that does a lot pretty well. But teams that do a lot pretty well at this stage in the game, I'm not sure how well that plays. You need something that's great, because everybody does pretty much everything pretty well, especially starting next week.
Yeah, there's always a Big Ten team that seems to get shipped out west to a Pac-12 site. Mm-hmm. This could be the team, assuming that a Kentucky or a Missouri is not hosting, or somebody in that region that's hosting that could maybe bust. They could be a team. They might be the candidate that travels out west of this group in the Big Ten, I think, this year in this situation, which always seems to happen to somebody in the Big Ten.
It's tough because as you look at sort of the footprint, not only is there aren't really any upper Midwest places to send anybody other than Evanston, and That doesn't take care of any Big
Right.
Ten teams. But you mentioned Kentucky being down. Mizzou isn't going to host. LSU isn't going to host. Or they're certainly,
Not in the
I
mix to
think,
host, right?
yeah,
Notre Dame might be the best option right now, the other one, if
sure.
they have a good ACC tournament.
Yeah, Notre Dame's probably the next team in sort of that, you know, Rust Belt, Appalachia range of the nation. That would be kind of the next place where you could bus a Big Ten team, because I'm not really seeing anybody else, whether it's Missouri, whether it's
Right.
Kentucky, or anybody like that.
Agreed. Agree 100%. Let's the rest of the field. Maryland, what a story. Mark Montgomery is the 5 seed. I don't think many predicted that, but he's done a heck of a job there. Michigan State, obviously the 12th seed. They're the host team. Purdue's the 11th seed. Indiana's the 10th seed. They open with Penn State with Bailey Marshall, who's the 7th seed. I think you're going to see a lot of her. Of those teams that I just mentioned, all right, that have to win the Big Ten tournament to get to the NCAA. There are no other options. If I told you, if I asked you pick one of those teams I just mentioned, that you're like, hey, don't be surprised if this team is trying to steal a bid and they're in the championship or in the semis on Friday or Saturday and could put some sweat to some bubble teams. Who is that team?
I would say Maryland, just because they've been so good throughout the year. They finished the regular season fairly well, and so they've got quite a bit of confidence. I like that lineup. Weich has been pretty good for them in the circle. Penn State's probably maybe a half step below them in that respect, because you mentioned Partial. I like her. I'm scared of her. I haven't seen her pitch yet this year, but she's pitched quite well for Penn State this year. And this time of year, you get that ace that's on a roll and believes she can throw a ball through a wall and beat anybody, and that can take you a long way. So but Maryland's a little more complete team in my eyes. I feel like they're the strongest true dark horse. I mean, excluding Minnesota, who we've talked about quite a bit, but
Yeah.
of that little group you mentioned, Maryland's the one that scares me the most.
You covered many of these Big Ten tournaments. What's the key to hoisting this trophy this week for whoever comes out on top? What's the one key factor for those that are going to be listening to you, they're going to be watching on the Big Ten Network? Whoever wins the Big Ten tournament does blank.
Gets a good performance from their starting pitcher, and ideally that's your ace that you've ridden all year, because unlike conference series, you're only going to see every pitcher once. So a Danielle Williams, you're going to see her once, and so often you ride your stud, you ride your ace, until you win or lose. So just have that starting pitcher be as good as she's been throughout the year, because you trust that if you're a decent team, then your offense should be able to push across a run or two for you.
That's Nate Rohr, the radio voice of the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I listen to him every so often. I appreciate the shout outs, by the way.
Oh, sure.
Tell the audience where they can find you this week, and if you're allowed to. If not, I understand. What's your setup in East Lansing?
So at Roar of the Crowd is my Twitter handle. And then we are at Husker Softball on Twitter, and all our game times and links to listen to us and such are available there. Our broadcasts are available on Huskers.com and the official Nebraska Athletics app. And Sekia Stadium in East Lansing's a nice place, but I'm told that they don't have a normal booth for us, which is a little disappointing. I'll have to chew out Tom Izzo, because of course I possess both the personality and strength to complain to Tom Izzo about anything.
Absolutely. Of course.
But Sekia Stadium's not bad. It's one of the better Big Ten stadiums.
Well, I hope you have fun. That's a fun time there, and I encourage people to check you out and the broadcast there. And man, have a great time. Thanks for taking the time. I know it's a busy time and getting ready to travel. Good luck, and we'll definitely hopefully talk soon.
Thanks so much, Eric. Glad to be here.